We're ready to go right now.
Everyone. Thanks for joining for today's Sihasin Hour. My co-host is trying to break in. But it's great to have everyone here with us today. We're super excited to be talking about broadband and the existing infrastructure that exists on Navajo Nation, as well as opportunities with the ARPA funding that the nation has received. So we have this wonderful panel of guests. We have Harold Scow, the former director of IT at Navajo Nation, and he has launched his own broadband development company, and it has done some really amazing projects on Navajo Nation. We have Dara Blackwater with us. I met Dara when she was a law student at the University of Arizona, and she's done some really interesting work looking at broadband opportunities for tribes and ways the tribes can express sovereignty in a more commanding manner to gain better access to broadband and capitalize on broadband opportunities. So very interesting work that she's done. I'm curious to hear her thoughts on the nation's opportunities with respect to the ARPA funding. And then we have Shaun Herrera, who you all know, our director of our Saving Sky Community Center. She's dialing in from, you can see from the background, Monument Valley. And Shaun kind of went through that experience of struggling to access Wi-Fi and internet access, and has had the opportunity to bring that to her community with the launch of the community center, and also has a really fun story of her personal experience recently gaining access to internet through Starlink. So we're excited to hear about that story as well. But first we'll start out with introducing ourselves. She'e Ethelbranchian Chef Nipatwani Nishle Nakai Bashis Chin Sinajani Dashache Don Nakai Dashanala Zizi Denasha. And I'm speaking to you from Kinsana. And I will hand things over to my brother Harold now.
Harold Scow, and SKOW is how you spell my last name. And I'm between Inchnedo, Hanesane, Dashijedo, Kapan Dashichedo, Bitane Dashinala. I'm originally from the Utah reservation, Navajo reservation area near the Chinle Wash. So I live in a beautiful place. I can see Monument Valley from the top of the ridge where I live, Navajo Mountain barriers. And I'm thankful and happy to join the group and discuss broadband on the Navajo Nation and what I see, what I think, and maybe give some suggestions on how we can improve broadband in our communities and the remote areas, and looking forward to the future. That's what I want to talk about.
Wonderful. Thank you, Harold. Dara, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yad ish Dara Blackwater Unishia, Besh Bachai Nishle, Dot Sena Jenny Bashish Chin, Ado Besh Bachai Dashiche, Ado Touch Ini Dashnale. So my name is Dara Blackwater. I'm originally from Farmington, New Mexico, and currently I'm in Berkeley, California, over in Ohlone territory. And my family is from Oljeto, where Shandine is now. So I'll kick it over to you, Shandine.
Thanks, Dara. Yad She'e Shandine Herrera Ganishia, Tachi Inishla, Nakaif Bahe Bashishim, but Ani Dashiche, Nakaif Bahe Dashanella, Ahot Ao Adenet Anishla, Ado at Sebian the Sky Danasha. Hello, everyone. My name is Shandine Herrera. I am the current director of the Sebian the Sky Community Center, located here in Monument Valley, Utah. And I'm really excited to hear from Dara and Harold and kind of learn, what's going on with broadband on Navajo. Something I'm really interested in and have some, personal experience returning back to Monument Valley after college and kind of struggling with access to internet. So I'm excited to, share what I can, but also just really thankful to be on this panel and learn from all of you. Yeah.
Well, I hear it to you all. And with no further ado, I think we'll get started. So Harold, tell us what is your assessment of the broadband resources that exist on Navajo, and what is the low-hanging fruit or the opportunities that exist with the nation's ARPA funding? And maybe go ahead and tell us a little bit about some of the cool projects that you've been working on.
Sure. Thank you. I want to go back a little bit in history. Back in 2003 is when I first came to work for the Navajo Nation as the IT director. And at that time, the Department of Information Technology had no internet. They had no server, no email server, basically nothing. They had a reel-to-reel tape system. And they would run it through this old machine, and they would print out checks. And that's what they were doing. But having to work in the private industry for several years, come to the Navajo Nation was a shocker. Come to the Navajo Nation as the IT director. Before that, I used to work at Cedars-Sinai Hospital in Beverly Hills, and I also work at Children's Hospital in Los Angeles, Computer Science Corporation, Aviana Global Technologies, USDA Forest Service, and other places doing consultant work. And I brought that experience back to the nation, and I knew I had to do something to make it better. And at that time, there was one fractional T1 line coming from one of the technical school in New Mexico through Rock Spring to the Navajo Nation to the frontier. And I found out that that fractional T1 line didn't even work half of the time. It was always down. And then I also found out that we were paying $27,000 a month for it. And that's when I started reaching out to AT&T and all these large companies. And I was able to bring AT&T in, and we were able to bring an OC3 microwave. And we did that fairly quickly, like within 30 days. And we started training our people in new technology and start planning on building a server in the data center. So we revamped the whole data center and start buying servers and equipment and training our people. And we brought up their skill level. It took like a year and a half before we start bringing in servers because the infrastructure was really bad. But we built that up. By the time I left in 2019, we have a fully virtualized environment. We had email servers, file servers, secured network, redundant network, and high-speed internet. So all of that was enjoyed by the Navajo Nation government. There was a lot of work that had to be done to really strengthen and make it work really good, but we were able to do that. I hope it's still like that today. And I hope they're doing improvement to it. But nevertheless, working there for 15 years, I've been to many broadband meetings. One of the biggest hurdles was always funding. There was always a lack of funding. So I try to have the schools, universities, and the Navajo Nation come together and create an integrated network. And it's very hard to do because private is private, government is government. And currently, I think with the ARPA money, it might be time because there's several meetings that are going on at different entities, which includes the private sector and the government sector. And there's talk about from the state level of creating a public-private partnership, PPP. On the Navajo Nation, you have to understand what's really needed. How can we spend the money? How can we move forward and have a better life in the digital world? Because back in the day, our people missed the Industrial Revolution. And right now we're in the digital revolution and we can't miss this. We have to change our future. We have to make a proper investment in our communities to bring broadband, because people can work remotely, they can do telemedicine, they can do distant learning and e-commerce. We need to make it so that people in the remote area can start their business from their homes and have a point of sale using the internet and enter the global economy. We need to change our direction, the way we live in the remote community, because looking at our people, just going to chapter meetings, and there's some internet at the chapter meeting, but the FCC standard speed is 25 megabits per second down and 3 megabits per second upload. But many of our places don't have that. I've worked with the state governor's office, the broadband group, and there's a website. If you go to the Utah state government, there's a website on there. They have a broadband section. In there, it lists on the 7 Utah chapter reservation. It shows who are the carriers there. And if you click on it, it'll show you the speed that these carriers carry. And it's like 3 megabits per second, which is far below 25. So you can connect, like when you have a phone, you can connect several ways. You can use your cellular phone, your hotspot on your cellular phone, or if you have Hughes network, you can use that to connect to the internet, or you can do Starlink. I have Starlink myself in Utah. Right now I'm renting a house in Window Rock, so I'll just, here I have to go back to Utah and go back and forth, but my phone will say 3 bar, 2 bar. And I'll try and check my bank account or something, it won't work. It'll just spend, then it'll just bomb out. So I have to get on, Starlink is pretty fast. I can get up to over 100 megabits per second using Starlink. It's only gone out on me a couple of times, but not very long. So I use that. And then if you go to the chapter house, you can get on, but their speed is not adequate also. Sometimes you're able to get on, and then it's restrictive, mainly for chapter administration. And that's what we have. And then if you have a T-Mobile, AT&T, Cellular One, these other, whatever carrier you have, if they have coverage out there, you can get on. But looking at FCC's website, you can look at the coverage map on the reservation. Like when I drill into the Utah section, San Juan County, if you drill in on T-Mobile's network, this is what they have. This is public information. You go down, 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 and you'll see there's 2G. 2G is available. In the digital economy infrastructure in the outside the nation, they're up to 5G, and they're planning for 6G. And our coverage map only shows 2G. So currently, we want to change that. Like in the northern reservation, Emory Telecom is working with Utah Education Network and San Juan School District. They're running fiber from Blandon all the way down to White Mesa School, that's the Ute Reservation, White Mesa, and then they go all the way down to Montezuma Creek, to Annette, to the White Horse High School. And then they go west and they go to Bluff, Utah. And in Bluff, Utah, they're doing fiber to the homes. And they're going westward all the way to Meskin Hat. And so we're trying to leverage that and bring some connectivity to our homes in Utah. So in 2019, we reached out to White Horse High School, San Juan School District, Utah Education Network, and Emory Telecom. Together, we were able to have the school apply for a grant from the state government, and they got 3.8 million. And the local area network at the San Juan School District is located in Blandon. Blandon, Utah. So from Blandon, we were able to use microwave and link all the way down to certain parts of the other Utah Navajo residents. So from September 2019 to March 2020, we were able to extend the school's network using different infrastructure, the fiber and microwave, all the way to over 1,000 Navajo homes for the kids. This is the school network, it's a very secure network. So the school, when they have opened up their Chromebook at home, we put equipment out on the reservation. We use any infrastructure we could. If there's already a pole there, we put equipment on there. We shoot to it from different towers and microwave it in. If there's none, we put a small structure there around their house. And then we put modem in their homes and they're able to get on at a very high speed, 25 megs down or better. So that's working. That's done in a very short time frame for the school. And we're hoping to do that for other school districts on the nation. So you have the educational network that's available. If you work with the school, putting in the right infrastructure inside the data center where all the connectivities happen, you can that school network to university network. You'll have a new university network to the home. You have the high school network to the home. And then if it's done properly, you can open up some bandwidth for regular residents to use those networks. So you can leverage that. You can have make it multiple use. So that's the school network you can use. And the Utah Education Health System, they extended their local area now using microwave, trying to reach the clinics at Utah 7 chapters. So they've done work with that. They put in extra tower, and at the tower they use solar panels to power the towers, and they put equipment on there, and then they shoot on down to the clinic. So that being those two projects was done when the COVID started, 2019. So that happened. There's no reason why that cannot happen on other parts of the Navajo Nation. And the government itself, the government back in 2008 is when the Obama stimulus package came. And that's how NTUA was able to put the towers and the broadband 550 miles across the Navajo Nation from Farmington through Shiprock to Hatchie, and then they go over the Mount of Fort Defiance to go to Window Rock, Venado, down to Tsaile, down to Rock Point, Mexican Water. Then they take a left turn all the way straight into Kayenta. So that in that infrastructure, that's a government network infrastructure. NTUA is part government. And so in that infrastructure, there's 96 strands in those fiber. That's like building a 96 lane freeway. But if you're only using like 14 lanes, the other 82 is unused. So that would be available when they do the integrated plan. Much of these fiber needs to be opened up to the private sector, the public, the schools, universities, so they can all utilize that to go forward. So kind of like an overall view, those are the resources that we have.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Harold, and a little bit of the story of the work that you guys were able to do with the school systems up at the Utah portion of Navajo Nation. I think it is interesting that you're all from Utah, essentially. Just happened by chance. So we didn't design it that way. Dara, do you want to share a little bit about the work that you do with respect to broadband and how that relates to Navajo Nation, and any thoughts you might have about opportunities that exist?
Sure, happy to. So for anyone who doesn't know me or isn't familiar with my work, I'll just sort of put it in a nutshell what I've been doing the last couple of years. So I just finished law school at the University of Arizona in 2020. And through my law school experience down at U of A, I was able to go back and forth to Washington, D.C. quite a bit. So the first time that I went out there, I was a UDAL intern, which is a congressional internship they do every year. They select 12 Native students. If you're a Native student, you don't have to be a law student, but if there are Native students out there, definitely apply for it because it's a great program. Shaun did that as well, which is actually where we met. We didn't even know that. Oh, you did it too. We didn't even know we were cousins until we met in DC and exchanged clans, and her mom figured it out for us. But yeah, so go to UDAL, meet your cousins in DC, and it'll be a great experience. So I was out there working for the Assistant Secretary of Indian Affairs in the summer of 2018. And they assigned me to look at the broadband, the digital divide issues. And I didn't know anything about it. So I just sort of started going to meetings and learning as much as I could about the digital divide in Indian country. And one of the things, it's so much of what Harold's talking about. It's infrastructure, it's policy, it's funding. But then the thing that I was the most drawn to and interested in was the concept of spectrum and spectrum rights. And so when Harold is talking about microwave, he's not talking about what you heat up your lean cuisine in. He's talking about microwave, which is electromagnetic spectrum waves that carry a wireless signal. So like Harold and Shaun right now are on Starlink, and that is like essentially a wireless connection that's coming from a satellite. And Ethel and I are probably using Wi-Fi. I mean, all of us are, but we're using Wi-Fi, and that is also using electromagnetic spectrum. So any wireless connection you have uses electromagnetic spectrum, whether it's like you hit your garage door opener and it opens your garage door, that's using spectrum, or Wi-Fi, or your cell phone obviously uses spectrum. And spectrum is electromagnetic spectrum is everything from everything I just described. Sunlight is electromagnetic spectrum. This light that's been moving across my face throughout this presentation is spectrum. So this is a really, really valuable resource, and it's something that we can utilize for telecommunications. And in this day and age, as Harold already pointed out, we can use this to connect, especially rural areas where we can't get a fiber connection, which fiber is the best connection that we have right now. It's essentially, fiber is like glass strands that are like, I think they're even finer than hair, or just about as fine as hair. And so they're glass strands that carry just the best connection, and it's just laser signals that are happening through that. So it's also sort of like spectrum, but it's through this fiber, this really, really fine glass. But it's really expensive, one, to purchase, and fiber is really expensive to lay. So it's hard to get fiber to all the rural corners of America, especially of Native nations, because there are funding issues, and then it takes a long time to get it out to all these places where people live, because we tend to live really far apart. So since we can't have fiber everywhere, that means that you run fiber to a tower and then you shoot it out, and that's what microwave is. So when you see a tower and it's shooting signal out, that's a wireless signal, and that that data is traveling on electromagnetic spectrum to get to your house or to get to your cell phone or whatever you're utilizing. So that's what microwave is. And you can hop. So you can hop it from one tower to another tower to another tower, and then shoot it out from there to a community. But it kind of loses its not value, but loses its strength if you do a bunch of hops. And so it's better to have fiber as close as possible. And I think of what a lot of people are thinking with these ARPA funds is we've got to get that. When we say that, get infrastructure out there, we're talking about fiber, we're talking about towers, and we're talking about owning it as Native nations. Because if you don't own the infrastructure, that means that you have to pay someone else to own the infrastructure. That means that you're relying on them to build it. It means that you have to make a lease and a contract with them on their terms if they own it. And it means a lack of sovereignty on our lands, because we want to be the ones who are holding power on our lands. And that means holding the infrastructure, which means investing these monies into it. So going back to how I came to this, I thought that spectrum was the most interesting thing. And I started asking questions because I didn't really understand what spectrum was or why it was important. And the more that I asked about it and the more I learned about it, the more that I realized this is just another natural resource. This is just like oil or gas or land or water that we've had to fight over. It's something that naturally occurs on our land. Spectrum isn't something that AT&T or Verizon or Sprint or anybody makes. It's just naturally occurring because of the way that our earth is made. And it's something that can be monetized. So what the FCC does, the FCC is the Federal Communications Commission, and that's an agency in the government, the US government. So what they do is they break the US into pieces and chunks, and they say, okay, we're going to hold an auction. We're auctioning off this 2.5 gigahertz band of spectrum in Monument Valley, Utah. Who wants to buy it? And then everyone says, I want to buy it. I'll give you this much money for it. I want to buy it. And then they fight over it. And then whoever pays the most money, they pay that money to the FCC, to the government, and then they get to use the spectrum. So that means that if a tribe doesn't purchase it, that they could have spectrum on their land that isn't owned by the tribe. It's owned by someone else. And that money didn't even go to the tribe. That money went to the US government. So through this process, tribes are being disenfranchised twice from their natural resource, electromagnetic spectrum, because not only can they not use the spectrum in the way that Harold's describing to connect their citizens and spread that signal out over their lands, they don't get the ability to use it because it's being sold to somebody else. But they also don't get to benefit from it. It's being sold, but that money isn't staying on the land. It's not staying with the tribe. It's going to the US Treasury. So they don't get their resource and they don't get the money for their resource. I use the example that it would be just like if the FCC put up big solar panels over the entire Navajo Nation and they collected all the sun and they made energy and sold it to Los Angeles and they kept the money. So not only does the Navajo people who live on the Navajo Nation don't get to grow crops and feel the sunshine on their face and have all the benefits of sunshine, but they also don't get any of the proceeds of the sunshine that was supposed to be on their land. So that's what's happening with electromagnetic spectrum on tribal lands. It's being sold out from under us. So it's important because, like I said, in these really rural areas, you need spectrum to connect people. You need it to connect homes. You need it to spray the signal out to everybody. And that's a lot of the work that Harold's talking about and that they're doing. And there are successes, like Harold mentioned. There was a 2.5 gigahertz spectrum tribal spectrum priority window, which means that the FCC said, okay, tribes, if you want one band of spectrum, the 2.5 gigahertz band, you can apply for it. And if we approve your application, then you can access this 2.5 gigahertz band, which is really good for rural areas because it can go really far and go through trees and everything. So there are small wins like that, but also that's, when all of our resources are being taken out from under us, like I said, that's really just a drop in the bucket. And it's kind of like taking away someone's entire cookie and then saying, well, if you fill out this application, I'll give you a crumb back. So as far as sovereignty goes, we have a lot of work to do, or rather America, the FCC, the US government has a lot of work to do to educate themselves about what it means to not disenfranchise Native nations from their resources. And spectrum is a huge one.
Interesting. Harold, do you have any, just to bring it back to you, any thoughts on additional opportunities that the nation has, with the $2.1 billion? I mean, now, $500 million has gone out, or at some point in the next 6 months is going to go out to our tribal members through the form of the hardship payments. But, that still leaves quite a bit of funding left. And so, Harold, if you had some say in how that funding was invested, where do you think those funds could be best invested to bring greater broadband access to our people?
Yes. What needs to happen is different entities, like I've said before, the private sector, public sector, the schools, universities, they don't have infrastructure. And there needs to be an MOU created between all of them to create an integrated plan and leverage all of those so that we won't have to spend building another tower besides another tower and wasting our money. We don't want to do that. We want to be able to
Uh-oh. I actually think Harold is in Window Rock, which makes total sense.
and quickly move forward in some amount of time. Because yeah, 2 or 3 years. So we need to work together, basically is what it is. And transparency is key to this, because you have to have everybody working together, because this money is only given for a short amount of time. We need to leverage what we have and work together, be transparent, and move as quickly as we can to get this done and reach our people, bring connectivity to the people, because the people is the one that's going to change the economy. We need to turn our economy, not using just resources from mineral resources, but we need to go into the knowledge economy. That's what we need to do with this money. It's our turn to really get into doing this and do it correctly, very quickly. We can't waste time. Time is precious.
I have a question for Harold. I'm curious if you made a list of the best way for the Navajo Nation to, or I mean any nation, but we're talking about Navajo, to spend their ARPA money. What would be at the top of the list, and then what would it look like going down?
Well, you have to understand the economy on the Navajo Nation. There's a model called Economies of Scale. On the left side, you have your costs. And then on the bottom graph going sideways, you have your time associated with, in this case, broadband throughput. How much is available that you can make? And then on the left side, the cost, since we don't have any infrastructure, not any, but there's infrastructure out there, but not enough. So to reach the very remote areas, to reach the unserved, underserved community on the Navajo reservation that are economic areas, it's going to cost a big chunk of money at the beginning. And as you move across the timeline from quarter to quarter, the more you put out there, your costs start to go down and your throughput starts to come up. We get more bandwidth, it's more available to the people. So we need to use this money correctly. If we don't, what's going to happen is, if you just build big government, it doesn't really get out to the community. Our remote communities are going to miss the digital revolution. They're going to be forgotten. We can't do that. The remote communities are unserved, underserved, and they're in the economically depressed region. Basically, a lot of our people's like that. There's been several studies in Arizona, FCC, there's a study over there, and I've seen other studies. They talk about the Native American population. From FCC, they said there's like about 630,000 Native homes without internet. You either have little or none. And that's a lot. And so they're saying that 1 in 5 on the reservation, they only have internet 1 in 5, but it's probably correct. It may be even worse, because if you just count your internet on your phone, yes, you have 2 bar, 3 bar, but when you try and get on the internet, it doesn't work. So I think we really need to leverage this money correctly, and knowing about the economies of scale, keeping that in mind. And the time to do it is very short. And if we don't do it correctly, what's going to happen is you're going to plan a meeting, then another meeting, and another meeting, and it's just going to the window of opportunity is going to sort of shrink on us. And then that's when you start making bad decisions. That's what's going to happen. So everybody needs to come together and be transparent and work together. That's the key.
Thank you. Yeah, in terms of the infrastructure, so Harold, you mentioned that about 20% of the people who live on Navajo Nation have access to the internet. Maybe you could flesh out that stat a little bit. I mean, the numbers that I've heard before, when it comes to at least cell-based access, 60% of the nation is a cell dead zone, as I understand it. And I experienced that. I have Verizon as a carrier. And when I used to drive across Navajo as Attorney General, trying to work while driving, I basically couldn't unless I was in one of the major population hubs like Tuba City or Window Rock, or along an interstate. So there's that issue of access to Wi-Fi through your cell phone or internet through your cell phone. And then I tried to research how much of Navajo had access to wired broadband. I couldn't find the answer easily, but I had this really great intern at Boston University School of Public Health, and he tracked down that 5% of homes on Navajo Nation have wired broadband, which was to me a shockingly low percentage. I don't really have a benchmark to compare that against, but I mean, it's virtually no one has wired broadband if it's 5%. And, you know, I've gone through the experience. My niece, I'm co-guardian of my niece with my mother, and she lives primarily with my mother on Navajo Nation, in the Loop area. And we have struggled with remote learning, and the Flagstaff Unified School District just removed their mask mandate. So we're probably going to have to go back to that. But I mean, you know, that's really close. We can see a tower at Meteor Crater. We can see multiple towers there, but we don't really have cell access at the house. And, you know, that's just, you know, 40 miles outside of Flagstaff, 20 miles from Winslow. And we still don't have very good, reliable internet access there. So, I mean, for me personally, one of the things I would invest in is, and we can turn now to, after Harold gives us some of the numbers, turn to Shaun to talk a little bit about her experience with Starlink. But I would just invest in a bunch of Starlink systems for families that have school-age children who are, you know, having to go to remote learning, and just build that capacity for future remote learning and putting those systems in people's homes. That does seem to be the answer. But Harold, I used to be a headmistress at a public charter high school in Sabadellkai, and there we utilized satellite internet, and it was disastrous. Like when the wind would blow really hard, and you know, Sabadellkai, that was like every other day, that we would lose internet. So I mean, tell me, like, why is that not an issue with Starlink? But anyway, so if you could address that question about, you know, what the numbers, maybe help me understand those a little bit more. Let me know if I'm understanding those right. And then address the satellite internet, and then Shaun, we'll turn to you to talk a little bit more about your Starlink experience.
Yes, I'm surprised by the 5%. I thought we had 0%. I'm not sure who has wired, but I know that one of the communication companies here, they have copper wire, the old technology that's still here on the nation. That seems to work with the DSL connectivity, but I do not rely on that personally a lot. I use it, but I have the DSL, and I have Starlink, and I have my hotspot on my cell phone ready to go. In case one of them goes out, I just switch it really quick. So I have to have three resources at my house to function. Right now it's really windy, and my hotspot is not working great. So I'm using the DSL right now. So that seems to work okay, but I think the 5% is probably like DSL, that's even old technology. The speed is not that great, but it works when it works, and when it doesn't want to work, it doesn't want to work. But what bothers me the most is I traveled to Tennessee, and when I got to my hotel, I had 5G, and it was great. And I did my work over there, and it seems I was walking around, I was hiking around too. I still was connected. I went 2 miles out away from my hotel, and I still was on 5G. So the cities are enjoying that, and we're not enjoying that here. And I think we're losing opportunities for our Navajo business people to do point of sale from their homes. And we're wasting much needed dollars for gas to drive into town to find a hotspot, to find a tower. And most of these towers I've been driving testing on the reservation at Mexican Water, on the chapter house, there's a tower up on the hill. And then there's a really tall tower on the south side. It's like a 400 feet tower, it's way up there. And then there's another tower by Bluff, Utah, right on the ridge. And then behind my house on the west side, going towards Mexican Hat, there's there's several towers up there. So why do I have 0 or 1 bar? I'm in the middle of these towers. So that tells me they don't have roaming agreements. They're not working with each other. And the people don't know. So when I think it was one of the carriers came, they want to put up another tower, and the people said no. We got all these towers around us, and we got 0 bar. What's going on? To me, I think the regulators at Navajo Nation need to file with FCC and make a complaint why there's no roaming. There needs to be more roaming. We're going to try and turn our economy around and get our people connected in remote communities. You need to have roaming, and they should be transparent with their fees, so we'll all know. Because you don't want to get a really big bill. You're on Zoom or you're doing something, work from home, and get a huge bill, and you don't want that. So they have to be transparent with their services and who we are roaming with, and make it known to the people that's what needs to happen.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that was something I always wondered, like, why isn't Navajo Nation Telecommunications Regulatory Commission exerting its regulatory authority and forcing these carriers to share towers and have roaming agreements? But yeah, I mean, that's certainly a good use of ARPA funding, I would think, to invest in the staffing and the capacity to do that. But Shaun, why don't you tell us a little bit about the story of internet with respect to the community center, and then kind of what you're experiencing with Starlink?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, that was one of our biggest challenges once we, kind of were in the process of opening the community center back in August of 2021. Obviously, if we're going to have a business center in there, we needed internet. So I spent some time, reaching out to different like telecom companies that do provide some service in our area. I even reached out to the school district, to UNHS, to see if we could work on some type of agreement to access their internet. But I just came up against a lot of barriers, really. Obviously, there's certain, things in their contract where they couldn't just share like with us publicly. And then, some of the telecom networks like would come to the site and do tests, just to make sure, it worked, and it wouldn't work. Like we even had, N2A come to the site and spent an entire day like trying to get signals at different parts of our community center. And we're just like, sorry, like we can't provide service here because we don't even get a signal. And so, it was frustrating. And there's a big tower right behind like our grocery store here, Golding's, but that's just, for Golding's to use for their grocery stores and hotels and things. So, while they have internet, we were struggling to find out what we could do. And like literally, I would say like the week before we opened the community center, we were kind of like, okay, what are we going to do? And thankfully, our hotspots worked. We had each gotten AT&T hotspots to work remotely. And so we're like, what if we just we have like 5 of them. We're like, what if we put all of them in the community center and see if it works? And it did. So we were able to like connect one computer and printer to like one hotspot. And the same thing for like our Xerox machine. So it like, is not necessarily like sustainable, but it works and it provides enough strength for people to come in and use the computer and use their Xerox machine and, get on their email, do virtual learning. And so, we were really thankful that it actually worked and we could, open our business center, which is actually our most popular site at the community center right now. Like nearly 70% of our visitations are to use, some of our equipment in there, but mainly just the Wi-Fi access. And so, it was challenging to kind of see that, but it's really cool to offer those resources because we see people who would have otherwise traveled 70 miles to Blanding to go to the public library or 30 miles to Kanta just to hotspot off their phone because you get better service in Kanta. And now they're able to, travel like 5 miles to our community center and spend, time there doing work. So, we've seen entrepreneurs come in and set up TripAdvisors or set up an Etsy account and will come in every so often, to kind of manage their businesses online. We see people who are able to get certifications. We have community members who'll come in and, spend days at a time, like from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. in the business center, doing their classes or their courses to earn a certification to go out and apply for a job. And of course, students who come in and who, like Ethel mentioned, wanting to just, do virtual learning rather than going into the schools and are able to do that comfortably within our community center. And so we've already seen in the, short amount of time that we've been open, like how incredibly vital this resource is to the community of Monument Valley, and especially for rural communities throughout the Navajo Nation who travel so far. I'm always shocked, and I really shouldn't be because like this is my lived experience growing up Monument Valley. But when people come in and just to fax paperwork, it saves them a trip, the 3-hour trip to Window Rock, or it saves them a trip 140 miles round trip to Blanding. So that's money that they're able to save and time they're able to save. And so, I'm just really proud that, we were able to offer those resources through the community center and just really thankful our hotspots are able to work for us in that way. One problem we had in the beginning is, of course, like the data caps for our hotspots because we just go through so much data in a week. But we were able to work that out where, we don't have that data cap anymore with our hotspots. And so that's allowed us to, have, a pretty decent speed there. I can't remember. I know, Dara, we did a speed test at the community center. I don't remember what those numbers were, but it was like 3 times what you would get if you just hotspot off your phone. And so it's what a lot of community members do here anyway. And so using the community center is definitely more efficient for them. And then with Starlink, like I'm using Starlink right now from home, and it's just been really amazing. We've never had internet in our household. And so when we actually got connected, we were just like going crazy because we're like, oh my God, like this is something like people enjoy on a daily and like, don't necessarily think of what life is like when you don't have this connection. For us before Starlink, we'd have to drive like to Kanta to hotspot for our phone or go to the school. And if they're nice enough that day, they'll let us have their password and get online. But, you're constantly trying to figure out what to do. Like if you, need to send an email, if you need to check your bank account, like things like that, like you literally have to leave your home to do that. And so now that we have Starlink, it's like, incredibly fast. I did some speed tests when we first got it, and just normally like hotspotting off my phone, and I have AT&T. I've also tried Verizon, I tried T-Mobile. One of the funny things here is like you literally try everything and just kind of settle for what is pretty decent. With my cell phone service here, the download speed I get is 7. And the upload speed is 5, right? So way below the standard like FCC numbers. And now with Starlink, my download speed is 211 and our upload speed is 14. So it's like just insanely faster. And, I'm able to do things like work from home, like join calls like this, do things online. My mom she's a seamstress, so she loves to make things, and now she's able to sell that online. And she also works from home. She works for Utah State University. Instead of like traveling to Blanding, she can just work from home. And so we've seen really, I've only had it for a few weeks now, but just how quick it is and how reliable it is. We've had some pretty interesting weather the last few days. We've had like a windstorm, we've had rain, we have snow today. And so we've kind of been watching just to see how it does with the different elements. And so far it's been really great. Like we haven't had any issues. When we do have storms like that, I lose cell phone service, our hotspots won't work. So yeah, the Starlink has been pretty reliable thus far. And when I kind of started sharing on my personal social media that I, had received Starlink, I was really excited about it and was showing people like how fast it is. It was interesting people's response to that, right? Like a lot of people who live on the Navajo Nation or who live, in different Native territories were excited. Either they had gotten theirs too and are just like enjoying this new lifestyle, or were excited to kind of hop on board. But of course, there's like people largely non-Native people who always have an interesting take when it comes to internet. And I always find it just like a really short-sighted take on it. People see where I live in Monument Valley and are like, oh, I would love to be off the grid, or I would love to not, have internet or cell phone service and just enjoy nature and things like that. And so it's always interesting to me because obviously you don't really know what it's like until you actually don't have those accesses, right? Like if you need to get online, if you need to take a class online, if you have an emergency and you need cell phone service to call an ambulance, like this, the day-to-day life that really requires access to, things like broadband and cell phone service. People don't understand that part. And so I always find that really interesting, right? It's like, oh, you should enjoy that. You don't have to kind of deal with this digital world and and so I'm like, okay, well, I really wish these people could come and live a day in our shoes, right? And see how hard it is to find these access points. But yeah, it's really been cool to kind of see other people learn about Starlink, especially other Native people, and now know this is, something that works, something that they can learn. Another comment I received about it was the price, right? It is a little bit of an investment. When I actually joined the wait list in May of 2021 and had to pay $100 to join that wait list. And then you pay $500 for the equipment. And then you kind of get that and set it up yourself. And then the monthly payments are $99. And so people, of course, that is a lot of money. And so it is an investment for people, who really do need this access, but don't necessarily have those funds. But for me, I was already paying upwards of $90 for internet service that didn't really even work. So, it kind of just, now that, it does work and I pay the exact same price I was paying, it's kind of to me, it just made sense, right? The investment is something I was willing to do, and fortunately was in a financial position to do that. But just having that reliable connection is just honestly life-changing. A few months ago, I was doing a Zoom call and I was doing the keynote speech for this year's Utah Scholars. And I was at home because the weather was bad and our hotspots at the community center were kind of going in and out. So I came home to do it and was hotspotting off of my phone because it was a little bit better. And right in the middle of my speech, I just completely lost connection and I could not get back on. And I like felt so bad. Like I was in the middle of my speech talking to these amazing scholars, and I like just lost connection. And for like the next hour, I didn't even have cell phone service. So I couldn't like tell them like, hey, I didn't just like leave. Like I lost connection. But you know, thankfully they're really understanding, but like it's just really frustrating when you're in these situations, like in an important meeting or just, you know, doing anything online and you just lose that connection. And so you know, that's just one of the many stories I have of like trying to be connected to, you know, the outside world, outside of my house and outside of my community. But, you know, it's really incredible. And I just like encourage people to kind of, you know, look into Starlink, look into what is available in your area, because, you know, there are different ways of connecting. And, you know, I just think now, you know, having this access and as more people get connected, you know, I really think it will also kind of help the brain drain that we're experiencing on the Navajo Nation. When I moved home from college, it was incredibly difficult my first year to kind of not just find work, but like have connection to do my job. And so I know a lot of my peers who try to come home and work or, you know, take classes online so they can be home and help their families, but aren't able to. And so we are kind of inadvertently are pushing our youth out, and you know they don't have that opportunity to be home. And so I think, you know, the more houses we get connected, the more access we provide on the Navajo Nation, we'll see more of our youth come home, and we'll kind of see the effects of brain drain go down, I believe. And so you know, I think that broadband, there's a lot of benefits to it, but there's also just a lot of realities that are inadvertent results of not having access. And so I think we're at a really interesting turning point now where, you know, we're finding out ways we can connect. There's funding like you all talked about. And so, you know, just hoping that's a priority and hoping like more families get to experience what I'm experiencing right now, like having stable connection and enjoying the benefits that come with that. But yeah, so far so good. I'll go ahead and pass it back to you, Ethel.
Yeah, no, that's great. And we love the story of what's happening with Shaun's Starlink use at home. And so we're trying to find ways to connect with those folks and see if we can get use of one of those, I don't know what they're called, the hubs or whatever at our community center, so that we have reliable and faster internet speed there. So fingers crossed. Harold, if you know anyone, or Dara can connect us with any of the folks at Starlink to maybe make us a pilot for, I don't want to say commercial use because we're a nonprofit, but that's probably where we would be categorized. But great. Well, we are coming up on the hour. Do you guys want to offer any final thoughts? Harold, we could get started with you and then kind of go around in order.
Sure. I mentioned I have Starlink at my house in Utah, which like Shaun was saying, I didn't have in the evening. We just have a radio, FM radio. We say turn technology on. We listen to the radio, and then we just go about our business around our house. And my sister has a other type of HughesNet, those ones. But when I got to Starlink, I was happy to say that our chapter house, Mexican Water Chapter House, there's the one that funded the Starlink for our community. So a lot of people have Starlink at the chapter house. So when I get my bill, it says 0. They pay for it, and they're using the funding, and also the whatever funding they're getting, they're paying for that. So which I'm really happy. Happy for my community that they're connected with Starlink. And this is 200 megabits per second and better. And we were watching a movie in the middle of nowhere. It was really great to see that. And the next morning when I turned on my laptop, I saw my Starlink, and also I have in my truck, I have AT&T. I saw that one. And then my cousin lives about a mile away. That's where we put the Sangwon School District network out to her house for her kids. So I saw that network. In the middle of nowhere, I see 3 network, which is a positive sign, you know. And I live way out in the remote end of the frontier is where I live. And so that's one option. Chapter houses could do that. So I just want to bring that out.
Awesome. Thank you, Harold. Dara, any parting words?
That's so great. I just want to thank you all for having me, and it's just a pleasure being on this panel. It's always good to talk to Harold and see you both. So thank you so much. Ahiaha.
Oh,
Shaun, any final thoughts?
Yeah, just to echo Dara, I learned a lot. I always love hearing Dara talk about broadband because it just like makes sense to me. Sometimes it seems like this concept that's just like over my head, but she does a great job of explaining it. But yeah, thank you, Dara, and thank you, Harold, for kind of sharing that background. And yeah, I'm just like really hoping, the nation and people kind of continue to learn about, the spectrum rights that we really have. And I know Dara says this all the time, but she, refers to broadband and spectrum as a human right, which, it really is. And I think it's something we really need to kind of think of in that way going forward, and bringing the access to our communities. So thank you both for the work that you do. And thanks for inviting me to this panel. Yeah.
We didn't get a chance to share much about it, but there's sort of the internet issue, and then there's the broader digital divide. And maybe at some point we can have that conversation. But a lot of the courses, the training we provide at the community center is just teaching people how to type, or how to create an email account, or how to navigate a computer. So there's a tremendous gap, and but hopefully with more access to internet, with leaders like Mexican Water Chapter at the forefront, bringing internet to our people, hopefully there will be more interest in accessing computers and things of that nature, and some of that gap can be closed. But well, this was really, really interesting and informative, and I thank you all so much for presenting today and sharing your thoughts and your perspectives, and fingers crossed that there is a cooperative spirit in the Navajo Nation's structuring of their broadband proposal, and also transparency, because our people deserve that. So you guys have a great day, and thank you to all our listeners, everyone. Just see you next week, I guess. Actually, we are going to have Sihasin Hour next week. We're taking next week off, so but we will have Sihasin Hour. Okay, you guys have a great day. Ahiaha and Hagonet.
Thank you. Ahiaha. Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.